Hello, in this video I'm going to continue talking about how to add unstated conclusions to common truth-functional argument forms. I'm continuing in practice problem set 3-11, and I'm just going to go through a couple of problems with you from this, number 8 and number 9. Number 8 is a quote from Machiavelli's The Prince. Since this was written quite a long time ago, the language is old-fashioned. I hope that doesn't cause you too much trouble. Here he writes as follows. Mercenary commanders are either skilled in warfare or they are not. If they are, you cannot trust them. If, however, the commander is lacking in prowess, as often as not, he brings about your ruin. All right, the first statement I'm noticing has an either-or structure. Either-or, of course, indicates disjunction. Mercenary commanders are skilled in warfare or they are not. We'll get one variable from that. Let P stand for mercenary commanders are skilled in warfare. And the premise tells us that either they are or they are not, so that's going to be P wedge negation sign P. Moving on to the next premise, it says if they are, so if P, you cannot trust them. Well, the consequent then is going to be you cannot trust them. I'll let Q stand for, let's say, they can be trusted or you can trust them. And then the consequent of this conditional is going to be negation sign Q. We have one more premise where he wrote, if, however, the commander is lacking in prowess, as often as not, he brings about your ruin. Let's think first about the antecedent of this conditional. The commander is lacking in prowess. Prowess and skill mean the same thing. So the antecedent is if the negation of P, then he brings about your ruin. And we'll need a new variable for that. Instead of your, I think I'll say the rulers in my variable assignment. All right, so these are the premises of the argument in number 8. If you look at the chart that has, or the box that has the common truth functional argument patterns, you'll see that there's only one that has 3 premises, and that's constructive dilemma. In constructive dilemma, one premise is a disjunction. The other 2 premises are conditionals, and their antecedents are the disjuncts in the premise that's a disjunction. How do we form the conclusion? Well, here's how. The conclusion is always another disjunction, and its disjuncts are the consequence of the 2 conditional premises. So in this case, that will be negation sign Q, wedge R. Constructive dilemma is a valid argument pattern. I'm going to turn now to number 9, which is pretty wordy, and it'll help me illustrate for you something about how to see correspondences or correlations between premises that might not appear to be very closely related to one another when you first read them. This was from a letter to the editor of the LA Times written in September of 2006 during the presidency of George W. Bush. The letter writer writes as follows. I wish to express my appreciation to President Bush for honestly admitting to the American people that he cannot maintain our security without resorting to illegal and immoral practices such as torture. However, we must not let sympathy for our president cloud our judgment. If he's not competent to govern the nation effectively and within the bounds of the law, it is his responsibility to step down and clear the way for someone who can. Now, it may be difficult to see exactly what the relationship is between the first premise and then the premise that starts with the word if at the very end of the third line there. And in this kind of situation, I figure, well, I know that the word if introduces the antecedent of a conditional. That's giving me some useful information about this argument. So I'm going to start by translating the conditional premise and then go back to look at the other premise. So let's see. After if, I'm looking now just for the antecedent. After if and before the comma, this says, he is not competent to govern the nation effectively and within the bounds of the law. He, of course, referring to President Bush. We'll get two variables from that. Let me let P stand for President Bush is competent to govern the nation effectively. And let's let Q stand for he is competent to govern the nation within the bounds of the law. The antecedent again says he is not competent to govern the nation effectively and within the bounds of the law. So it's telling us that the conjunction of P and Q is false. Okay? Let's move now to the consequent. Let me write this lower. After the comma. We'll find the consequent where it says it is his responsibility to step down and clear the way for someone who can. It is his responsibility to resign. Let's let R stand for that. After that, it says, and clear the way for someone who can. And is giving us, again, conjunction. What does clear the way for someone who can mean? It means clear the way for someone who can govern the nation effectively and for someone who can govern the nation within the bounds of the law. So that's actually going to give us two more variables. So I've let R stand for it's his responsibility to resign. S stands for it is his responsibility to clear the way for someone who can govern the nation effectively. And U stands for it is his responsibility to clear the way for someone who can govern the nation lawfully or within the bounds of the law. So we have here a rather complicated conditional premise. The antecedent is the negation of P ampersand Q. And then the consequent is this compound conjunction open parenthesis R, ampersand, open parenthesis S, ampersand U, followed by 2 close parentheses. Let's go back now to the first sentence, where the writer says, I wish to express my appreciation to President Bush for honestly admitting to American people that he cannot maintain our security without resorting to illegal and immoral practices such as torture. You might be tempted to get more variables from that, but if you do, you're going to be understanding that premise in a way such that it has no relationship to this conditional premise. And clearly the person who wrote this letter intends for his premises to be related to each other. So let's see. We can understand that as a way of the letter writer saying that President Bush is not competent to govern the nation effectively and within the bounds of the law. In other words, we're going to understand that first premise as simply the antecedent of the conditional premise. So now we're looking at an example of modus ponens, which I'm just abbreviating here as MP. Again, in the modus ponens pattern, one premise is a conditional. The other premise is the antecedent of the conditional premise, and the conclusion then is the consequent of the conditional premise. So this letter writer's conclusion is that it is President Bush's responsibility to step down and clear the way for someone who can govern the nation effectively and within the bounds of the law. All right, I hope that this has been helpful to you, and I'll talk to you again soon in another video. Take care. Goodbye for now.